What happens when one of America's biggest cities starts falling apart before your eyes?
Make sure there's going to be law and order. You had a disaster happening.
What happens when 75,000 people have nowhere to sleep at night, and nearly 1 million people live in constant fear of being arrested just for existing? What you're about to see will shock you. Los Angeles, the city of dreams, is becoming a city of nightmares. And the worst part? It's happening right now. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what's happening in LA could be coming to your city next. The numbers I'm about to share will make you question everything you thought you knew about America. The shocking reality that no one talks about. Let me ask you something. Can you imagine walking down the street and seeing 75,000 people with no place to call home? That's not a made-up number. That's the reality in Los Angeles County right now. But here's what makes it even more terrifying. This number actually went down from last year. You heard that right, celebrating because only 75,000 people are homeless. Think about that for a second. If 75,000 people showed up at your local football stadium, it would be completely packed. Now imagine all those people living on the streets, in tents, under bridges, and in their cars. That's Los Angeles today. But wait, there's more. Want to know something that'll blow your mind? In the city of Los Angeles alone, 45,252 people are homeless. That's bigger than the entire population of many American towns. And these aren't just numbers on a screen. These are real people with real stories.
So what happened? How did one of the richest cities in the world become home to the largest homeless population in America? And why does it feel like nobody can fix it? The numbers that tell a terrifying story. Here's where things get really scary. While Los Angeles saw its homeless numbers drop slightly, the rest of America saw an 18% increase in homelessness. Let that sink in. The problem is getting worse everywhere else, but LA is barely holding steady with 75,000 people on the streets. But here's the question nobody wants to answer. What happens when you can't afford to live where you work? The average household in Los Angeles makes about $75,000 a year. Sounds pretty good, right? But here's the problem. When you're an immigrant, especially an undocumented one, that number drops to just $46,500. That's almost $30,000 less. And in a city where rent can cost $2,000 to $3,000 or even $4,000 a month, that difference means everything. Do you know what it feels like to spend more than half your income just on rent? Most people can't even imagine it, but for 67% of undocumented families in LA, this is their reality. They're paying 30% or more of their income just to have a roof over their heads. Compare that to families born in America, where 56% face the same burden. When nearly 7 out of 10 families are spending most of their money just on housing, what happens to everything else? Food, medicine, children's clothes, school supplies. Everything becomes a choice between survival today and survival tomorrow. The human wave that changed everything. Now let me tell you about something that most news channels won't show you the full picture of. Los Angeles County is home to 3.5 million immigrants. Think about that number, 3.5 million. That's more than the entire population of most states. These immigrants make up 35% of everyone living in LA County, more than 1 in 3 people. But here's the part that will really surprise you. Of those 3.5 million immigrants, 809,000 are undocumented. That means 1 in every 5 people in LA County either doesn't have legal papers or lives with someone who doesn't have legal papers. Can you imagine living every single day not knowing if you'll be arrested just for going to work? Not knowing if your children will come home from school to find you gone? This is the reality for nearly 1 million people in Los Angeles right now. But why does this matter for homelessness? Here's the connection nobody talks about. When you're afraid to call the police, afraid to go to government offices, afraid to ask for help, where do you go when you can't pay rent? You end up on the street. You end up invisible. The breaking point. What happened this year? This year, something happened that showed just how close it is to complete breakdown. In June, federal immigration officers conducted massive raids across Southern California. In just a few days, they arrested 330 people. The government said 113 of them had criminal backgrounds, but what about the other 217? What about their families? What about their children?
Picture this. You wake up in the morning, go to work like any normal day, and by evening, you're in custody. Your family doesn't know where you are. Your children come home from school to an empty house. Your rent still needs to be paid, but now there's no income. The raids were so intense that protests erupted throughout downtown Los Angeles. The situation got so bad that the city had to impose a curfew. When was the last time you heard about curfews in American cities? This isn't some faraway conflict. This happened in Los Angeles in 2025. So here's my question for you. What happens to a city when hundreds of thousands of people live in constant fear? What happens when families are torn apart overnight? What happens when people are too scared to report crimes, go to hospitals, or even send their children to school? The places where dreams die. Let me take you on a virtual tour of where this crisis is happening. Have you ever heard of Skid Row? It's a 50-block area in downtown Los Angeles that has become the epicenter of America's homelessness crisis. Imagine walking through streets where every sidewalk is lined with tents, where people live in conditions that most Americans wouldn't accept for their pets. But it's not just Skid Row anymore. The crisis has spread to Venice Beach, once famous for its artists and street performers. Now, it's known for massive homeless encampments right next to million-dollar homes. Hollywood, the place where movie stars are made, now has people sleeping under the stars because they have nowhere else to go. Here's what's really disturbing. These aren't just isolated pockets anymore. The crisis is spreading to neighborhoods that used to be safe, clean, and affordable. Areas where families raised their children for generations are now seeing tent cities pop up in parks, under freeway overpasses, and in parking lots. What would you do if this started happening in your neighborhood? Would you move? Would you stay and try to help? Would you pretend it's not happening? The money trail, where billions go to die. Here's something that will make your blood boil. Los Angeles has spent billions of dollars trying to fix the homeless crisis. Billions with a B. In 2023 alone, they managed to move 27,419 people into permanent housing. That sounds great, right? But here's the math that should scare you. If they spent billions to house 27,419 people and there are still 75,000 people on the streets, how long will it take to fix this problem? How much money will it cost? And where is all that money coming from? Want to know something even more shocking? The cost of keeping someone homeless is actually more expensive than housing them. Emergency room visits, police calls, court cost, jail time, all of this costs taxpayers more money than just giving people homes. But the system is so broken that it's easier to spend more money on the problem than to actually solve it. So here's my question. If we know the solution costs less than the problem, why isn't it fixed? What's really going on behind the scenes? The invisible economy. Let me tell you about something that most people don't understand. Those 3.5 million immigrants in LA County aren't just taking up space. They're keeping the city alive. They work in restaurants, hotels, construction, agriculture, healthcare, and thousands of other jobs. Many work multiple jobs just to survive. But here's the cruel reality. The same people who keep the city running can't afford to live in the city they're keeping alive. The people who clean office buildings can't afford apartments in those buildings. The people who serve food in expensive restaurants eat cheap food at home, if they can afford to eat at home at all. Think about this for a moment. What happens to a city when the people who do the essential work can't afford to live there? What happens when teachers, firefighters, nurses, and restaurant workers have to live 2 hours away from their jobs? What happens when the people who make your coffee in the morning sleep in their cars at night? This is what's happening in Los Angeles right now. The people who make the city work are being pushed out by the very success they help create. The Fear Factory. Let me paint you a picture of what life is like for nearly 1 million people in Los Angeles. You wake up every morning knowing that today could be the day everything changes. You send your children to school not knowing if they'll be there when they come home. You go to work knowing that a simple traffic stop could end with deportation. But here's what makes it even worse. You can't call the police if someone robs you. You can't go to the hospital if you're sick. You can't report workplace abuse. You can't ask for help when you need it most. You become invisible, except when someone wants to blame you for problems you didn't create. Can you imagine living like this? Can you imagine the stress, the anxiety, the constant fear? And now imagine trying to pay rent, buy food, and raise children while living in this state of fear every single day. This fear doesn't just affect the people living it, it affects entire communities. When people are afraid to report crimes, crime goes up. When people are afraid to go to hospitals, diseases spread. When people are afraid to cooperate with authorities, everyone becomes less safe. The ripple effect that's destroying communities. Here's something that should terrify anyone who cares about America. What's happening in Los Angeles isn't staying in Los Angeles. The problems are spreading. Other cities are seeing their homeless populations explode. Other communities are dealing with immigration raids and family separations. But why should you care if you don't live? Because Los Angeles is America's second largest city. It's a major economic engine. It's home to Hollywood, major ports, tech companies, and millions of workers. When it struggles, the entire country feels it. Think about it this way. If you have a major infection in one part of your body, it doesn't stay localized. It spreads. It affects your entire system. That's what's happening with America's cities right now. The housing crisis drives up housing costs everywhere else. The immigration crisis creates political tensions that affect national policy. The homelessness crisis strains federal resources and changes how Americans think about poverty and government. The children caught in the middle. Let me tell you the part of this story that should break your heart. There are children, American citizens, who go to school every day not knowing if their parents will be home when they get back. There are children living in cars, in shelters, in overcrowded apartments with multiple families. These children didn't choose any of this. They didn't choose to be born into poverty. They didn't choose to have parents without documents. They didn't choose to live in a system that seems designed to fail them. But here's what they do choose every day. They choose to go to school. They choose to hope for a better future. They choose to believe that hard work will pay off. And every day, the system fails them a little bit more. What kind of future are we creating for these children? What kind of society tells kids to work hard and follow their dreams, then makes it impossible for their families to survive? The system that's built to fail. Here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. The current system isn't broken by accident. It's working exactly as it was designed to work. It creates a class of people who are desperate enough to work for low wages, scared enough to never complain, and invisible enough to be ignored when convenient. Think about it. If you fix the immigration system, who's going to work the jobs that Americans don't want for wages that Americans won't accept? If you solve the homelessness, how do you keep property values high in expensive neighborhoods? If you create affordable housing, how do wealthy people maintain their wealth? This is the uncomfortable truth. The crisis in Los Angeles benefits some people. It benefits landlords who can charge high rents. It benefits employers who can pay low wages. It benefits anyone who profits from desperation and fear. The point of no return. Here's what should scare you the most. We might be reaching the point where the problems become impossible to solve. When you have 75,000 people homeless and nearly 1 million people living in fear, the social fabric starts to break down. Think about other cities that have collapsed throughout history. It didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually, then suddenly. First, the problems became too big to ignore. Then they became too big to solve. Are we watching Los Angeles reach that point right now? When businesses start leaving because of crime and homelessness, tax revenue goes down. When tax revenue goes down, there's less money for schools, police, fire departments, and social services. When those services get worse, more businesses leave. It becomes a downward spiral that's almost impossible to stop. The question is, have we already passed the point where it can be saved? Or is there still time to turn things around? What this means for America. Let me be clear about something. Los Angeles is not just one city dealing with unique problems. Los Angeles is America's future if we don't change course. The same forces creating crisis in LA, expensive housing, wage inequality, broken immigration system, lack of mental health services, exist in cities across the country. Seattle, San Francisco, New York, Austin, Denver, they're all dealing with similar problems. Some are just a few years behind Los Angeles. So here's my question for you. What are you going to do with this information? Are you going to pretend this doesn't affect you? Are you going to hope it doesn't come to your city? Or are you going to demand that leaders find real solutions before it's too late? Because here's the reality. Ignoring problems doesn't make them go away. It makes them bigger. And eventually, they become too big to ignore and too big to solve. The choice we all face. As I finish this documentary, I want you to think about something. Every single person experiencing homelessness in Los Angeles was once someone's child. Every immigrant family living in fear once believed in the American dream. Every tent on every street represents someone's hopes that got crushed. But here's what gives me hope. For every story of despair, there are stories of people fighting back. Community organizations working day and night to help. Volunteers giving their time and money, businesses creating jobs and opportunities, local leaders trying to find solutions. The question is, which side of history do you want to be on? The side that looked away when people needed help, or the side that demanded action when action was still possible? What's happening in Los Angeles is a test. It's a test of our values, our priorities, and our commitment to the idea that everyone deserves a chance at a decent life. Are we going to pass that test? Or are we going to watch one of America's greatest cities collapse while we argue about who's to blame? The choice is ours. The time is now. and the stakes have never been higher. If this video opened your eyes to what's really happening in Los Angeles, please share it with others. Subscribe for more content that exposes the truth about what's happening in America's cities. And let me know in the comments, what do you think should be done to solve this crisis? Because until we start talking about real solutions, the problems will only get worse. And LA's crisis today could be your city's crisis tomorrow.